Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's movie blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today we'll be talking a little bit more about the Rise of Skywalker. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that has watched the review that I posted yesterday, or rather this morning at 3 a.m. About 8,000 or 9,000 of you at this point, which is insane. So thank you so much. Also, we've gained about 300 subs since that review went live. So seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for joining the channel. I don't know if it's because of the Geeks and Gamers review, which is at, I think, 100,000 views, or if it was the one on here, but seriously, thank you so much. It means a lot. But the Rise of Skywalker is a very, very, very bad movie, as I mentioned in my review of the film. If you want more on my thoughts, my spoiler-free thoughts on the film with John the Flick Pick, go check out the video that was posted earlier today. Today, I'm going to be talking specifically about the Rotten Tomatoes score. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a long time, you know that I do not trust Rotten Tomatoes because I think their system is incredibly flawed. For those that maybe don't know how the Rotten Tomatoes system works, this is how it does. So, oftentimes, we get that tomato meter score. 59% is the score right now for the Rise of Skywalker, which means it is a rotten score. Anything below 60% is considered to be rotten. Fresh is around the 60 to 65 or 70% range, and if it has a certain number of views at a certain percentage, it is considered to be certified fresh. Based on these ratings, I don't think that this film is going to ever be certified fresh, though whether it ends up on the fresh or rotten side is really going to be the one to watch. That's why currently on my secondary channel, Welcome to Asgard, there is a live stream continually to go on. It's going to go on for as long as I can keep it running, and it's going to be constantly refreshing this page, so that way we can follow where this rating ends up going. Does it drop? Does it raise? But also to see whether or not reviews get deleted, added in en masse, changed, or anything to that effect, because we know that that is what Rotten Tomatoes has done in the past by actually deleting user scores. Now, it might not be the same for the critics. The critics are probably going to be pretty safe, which is why the numbers probably aren't going to change all that drastically. But still, I want to have it being recorded nonetheless, just in case they try anything. But that 59% means that out of all of the critics, which is currently 198 critics who have left reviews, 59% of them have said that the film is fresh. So that means that when they have their reviews on their regular respective channels or websites or blogs or newspaper outlets, they have their own review, they have their own scoring system. Every person's different. Some people uses the A to B to D to, A, B, C, D, F scale. Other people use number scales out of 10, out of 100, whatever it is. Some people don't even leave any ratings whatsoever. And so what Rotten Tomatoes has done is said, hey, if you want to be an official Rotten Tomatoes review critic, whenever you post your review, you have to let us know whether or not you think it is rotten or fresh. And so that is the only actual metric that Rotten Tomatoes officially uses for all of its reviewers. So any person that puts a review out that goes to Rotten Tomatoes has to determine whether or not they think the film is fresh or rotten. So when you see 59%, that doesn't mean that that's the overall rating. That doesn't mean that that's everyone out of 10 or out of 100, the score that they gave. What it means is that out of all of the almost 200 critics that have posted a review, almost, a little less, rather, about 41% have thought that the film, rather 59% think that the film is fresh, while 41% think the film is rotten. You can see that number break down because you have 116 fresh reviews versus 82 rotten reviews. That comes out to be 59%. But even here, oftentimes the numbers really don't pan out all that much, but of course it's being taken from the overall. In fact, let's go ahead and double check that because you all know how I feel about Rotten Tomatoes. And so 59%, again, that means it's a 59% positive score. So let's take that score, 116 divided by 198 and 58.5. So yes, that is correct. So the math is correct there. Just wanted to make sure, Rotten Tomatoes, because I know that sometimes you'll throw that around. So that's where that 59% comes from. So 116 fresh ratings out of 198 total ratings means that it has a 58.5% fresh rating versus the 82%, or rather the 82 reviews. Let's go ahead and put that number in. 82 divided by 198, that would put it at 41%. So 41% of critics have saying this film is rotten, while the other 59% say that it is currently fresh. And that number is going to fluctuate depending on how the future critics decide to rate their movies. You also dive into an average rating score. So out of all of the reviewers that actually leave a rating out of 10, this is where this comes into play. That's why this number is never going to match this one. This is a number that relies, or rather that applies to to every single person that puts a review onto this site. So all 198 people have had to click whether they think the movie is fresh or rotten, and they get to determine whether or not their review is fresh or rotten or not. In fact, we've seen it happen before where certain critics have given the same score, 2 out of 4, and have said, oh, but in this situation, it's fresh. Oh, and in this situation, is rotten. So the whole system is already bankrupt because the reviewers can basically, if they want to give it a fresh rating, if they want to try and basically help their buddies out at whatever studio they're reviewing, they want to say, oh yeah, I'll give it a fresh rating even though I didn't give it a glowing review, because everyone's just going to see the score and not actually dive in to see what people are actually saying. So some reviewers, though, do leave a 10 scale, and so this means that out of the reviewers that have done that, it's gotten a 6.24 out of 10. So out of all the people that have actually left a score, the average rating is a 6.24 out of 10, which is around a 62%, which last time I checked as a teacher is a failing grade. But of course, we all know when it comes to movie reviews, it's not nearly as simple as all that. But then you dive into things like the top critic score. And out of the top critics, which again is a metric that is determined by RottenTomatoes.com, the score actually drops. So 49% of top critics think that the film is fresh, while 51% think that the film is rotten. So 23 rotten scores versus 22 fresh scores. You do the same type of calculations, you'll see that it comes out to the same number. And what's interesting, though, is out of the top critics, out of the ones that actually left the review, their average rating is actually higher. And as I mentioned before, the reason why is because they do not determine the Rotten Tomatoes score. The aggregate tomato meter score is not based off of their actual rating of the movie, but whether or not they clicked off when they submitted their review, whether they think the movie is fresh or rotten. And that's the reason why I really don't trust Rotten Tomatoes all that much, because instead of having a uniform metric like Metacritic does, which is why I much rather trust Metacritic, they instead decide to have their own arbitrary system, which they think, oh, but you know what? It keeps everyone on the same page. That way, we don't have to worry about people having to change from an A to D scale versus a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 100 scale. And that way, we can all just have everyone just be on the same page here, which, yeah, it sounds nice in practice. It sounds nice when you really think about it or when you hear it out loud. But then when you actually put it into practice and see the type of movies that get the certain grades that they do, it really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So this number is going to fluctuate up and down as the day goes by. And as I said, if you want to check out the live rating or the live updates to that, Welcome to Asgard has that video, has that live stream going for you. And again, I'll hold it for as long as I possibly can. What will be more interesting is when this audience score comes in, because this is going to be one of the first very large films. Obviously, we've had some big releases since this change has happened. But as far as a Star Wars film, it'll be the first film since The Last Jedi in which we have the new Rotten Tomatoes audience score clarifications or qualifications. So basically, in order to be a verified audience score, because now they verify audience scores now, you have to be able to have shown and proven that you purchased a movie ticket. So if you bought a ticket through Fandango, whom they are connected with, then it'll show up and it'll allow you to review the movie. If you order it through another service like Atom Tickets or something like that, there's other ways that you can verify your ticket purchase. So if you go ahead and submit your review and it shows that you indeed are verified, it'll then post your reaction. So they have a verified audience score and then they have a non-verified audience score. So let me just show a more recent film. We have here Jumanji Part 3 or Jumanji The Next Level. So as you can see, the verified ratings, 7,000, has the movie 87%. That means 87% of the people, so this is another thing to look into, 87% of the audience put the score of a 3.5 or higher. So this, even the audience score, is not a good aggregate because it does not tell you what the actual rating is. The actual average rating is a 4.3 out of 5. 87%, 4.3 out of 5. Let's see how close those numbers actually match up. So we got a 4.3 divided by 5. That puts it at 86%. So it is relatively close here. But as you can see, the percentage is indeed made up of those that gave it a 3.5 star or higher rating. 87% of users did that. There's now also an all audience rating, which as you can see is a little bit higher. Over 1,000 more people reviewed this. Their average rating is a 4.24 out of 5. And as you can see, the number actually drops a little bit. So we see some very interesting discrepancies here where it's not a large difference. It's not a major difference by any means, and sometimes you see that happen. Let's take a larger film. Verified ratings 37,000, 92% over on Rotten Tomatoes. All audience score drops it by 2 percentage points. Nothing too crazy there. So what's interesting to me, or what's going to be interesting, is going to be where this audience score falls, and if we see some of the same trickery and some of the same nonsense from Rotten Tomatoes that we saw for previous movies where they actually deleted scores. That's right, they went in and deleted scores that ended up changing the overall rating of the film, and dear Lord, was it hilarious to see how they epically failed. I remember getting that on live stream and actually showing the moments in which 20, 30,000 reviews just automatically disappeared and were purged from the register just to increase the level of the film. It was truly amazing to see happen live, and it was amazing to see the reaction that happened after that as well. But what do you think is going to be the final critic score for Rise of Skywalker? I think that we might actually have a very similar critic and audience score for one of the first times in a very long time. I feel that oftentimes critics will praise really bad films because they're shills or because it has some type of political element to it that they want to support, where audiences have no time for that crap, and so they're a lot more honest in their overall thoughts of the film because they don't have to protect anybody and they don't really care about political messaging. They just want to have good movies. And so what do you think is going to be the discrepancy between the critic and audience score? I would love to hear your thoughts about that in the comments section below, and also what you think the final score is going to be for the critics. Do you think that it's going to drop even lower or maybe even get a little bit higher? Let's try and refresh it because every now and then they'll have new bunches, new totals added in for the critic scores, and this number will change accordingly based on whether they said the movie was fresh or rotten. And I highly recommend diving into these reviews because, as you can see, there are a crap ton of negative reviews, and out of all of the ones that are positive, it is kind of hilarious to see how they try and justify it. So you see some 2 out of 4s here that are negative. I would not be surprised if you have a couple of people here that give a positive rating, a fresh rating to the movie, even though they also give it a 2 out of 4, because we've seen that happen previously. But what's even hilarious, or more hilarious really, is the fact that some of these people are basically trying to justify their scores by saying, oh, it's bad, it's not very well done, but it's got fan service and it makes me happy. And the other thing to look at, of course, is this very ridiculous and totally bought and paid for by Disney critics consensus, because some people, they'll look at the score and they'll say, oh, it doesn't seem that good. And then they'll read the critic consensus and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's not that bad. And it says, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker suffers from a frustrating lack of imagination, but concludes this beloved saga with fan-focused devotion. So if you were to read that, you would say, that sounds pretty good to me. It's amazing that the 59% rotten score here does not really correspond very much with this. And other films that get very similar scores, and even sometimes higher scores than this, are in the fresh rating, will get some really bad negative critics consensus scores. So 59%, the one thing I can think of right now that I kind of want to look into is the latest Rambo film, Rambo Last Blood. So this film had a 27%. And it says, like the sequels that preceded it, Rambo Last Blood is content to indulge in bloody violence at the expense of its main character's once poignant story. That's a pretty negative view of it, even though audiences loved it, and the critics, of course, hated it because why wouldn't they? It obviously had certain political tones, or either they in their reviews had political tones. The film was just trying to tell a good story and just trying to be entertaining, but obviously they looked into it a little bit more than that. So let me know your thoughts about this and all the things talked about in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash the like button and give us a subscribe. It also does a lot. You are amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful night. And as always, God bless.